everybody, good afternoon and welcome to our latest webinar. Today's webinar is all about the skills gap in a volatile market. So really, as organizations face market volatility, how can they build their critical skills in analytics and AI to help attract and then retain some of the best employees in their organization? We see that employees with AI skill sets are particularly hard to find. So as an AI leader, it's important to really identify key skills each employee brings to the table and really think through their career path to really advance the organization's capabilities overall. So this webinar, as prior ones were, is all going to be about what we've seen work in the field and approaches that really help organizations accelerate closing that skills gap. My name is Nick Wu. I'm Solutions Director at Align AI. And for those getting to know Align AI is all focused on the future of work. So how can we help organizations accelerate and scale their analytics and AI capabilities, either through our adoption platform or some of the solutions we provide? I am joined by Jeanette. Jeanette, thank you so much for joining and setting aside some time. You will be our guest today. Jeanette, would you mind spending some time to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you. Hello, and thank you for having me. My name is Jeanette Vinciguerra. I'm a director at Tradeweb. For those of you not familiar with Tradeweb, Tradeweb is a leading builder and operator of electronic markets. We focus on applying innovative technology to streamline and improve the trade life cycle. I've been with the firm since 2018, and I manage strategic initiatives for one of their platforms called the DealerWeb platform. And prior to joining Tradeweb, I worked at several banks as a development manager.
Nice. Thanks for joining, Jeanette. And Jeanette is also an advisor to us and our team at Align AI. She's been a huge help since joining. And again, really appreciate you hopping on. I'm excited to talk about this topic. And it's funny, in the kind of dry run we had before this, we started getting into the conversation as well. And we had to stop ourselves. Let's save it for the conversation. It's so interesting. Before we get into the conversation, I do want to show some quick stats that we really see from our research, which is related to the amount of AI jobs that are posted out there, which in 2020 was well over 600,000 kind of jobs related to AI and data posted in 2020. 31.4% increase in employment is expected by 2030 related to AI jobs. So this is certainly a huge gap, and it's growing over the next 10 years. And then more importantly, that middle metric, 2/3 of those companies are really struggling to find the right candidates in the hiring process, as well as the overall retention process as well. So very, very topical, very, very large and growing problem that we have. And really, Jeanette, thank you again for joining so we can talk through some of this stuff. So let me go ahead and stop my share and really open up today's topic, which is the skills gap, more specifically, the talent gap in those high potential employees with analytics and AI skill sets. We really chose this topic because we see a significant uptick in companies with that talent shortage. And really, as a data scientist, one thing that you brought up, Jeanette, as we were discussing this topic is, what does my career path look like? I think some years ago, we were just excited to get a data scientist, but now that it's a much more formalized kind of role in an organization, there's got to be career progression, just like anything else too. So wanted to talk to you initially to kick it off about your perspective around just how the role has evolved and how career expectations have changed specific to the data and scientist role.
Yeah, and if I bring it back to that statistic that you brought up, one of the questions I had when we first started talking about that statistics right before the webinar was that 2/3. What is that really? Why is that 2/3 gap there? And what you had mentioned was attrition, people not staying in their roles. And I think that speaks to that gap of not having enough data scientists or not understanding maybe what the career path is for data scientists, right? Why is there attrition? Is it that you get onto a project and project that doesn't seem interesting, or you don't understand the project, or it's not what you expected? How do you make those data scientists stay at a firm longer? Right. And what do we do? How do we maintain them? Attract the right talent and keep the right talent. And it's not a issue that's unique to data science. I think it's unique to all. It's seen in all facets, but because data science is a very new field, it's almost unthought of sometimes. You're just looking for a data scientist. You're not thinking about how do you grow this person's career. Yeah. So So I think that's one of the biggest gaps that we have to address.
And I think just related to attracting them as well, we talk a lot about struggling to find the right candidates because you're posting such a wide job description around what you like out of candidates. So as these companies are maturing the function and the capability overall, they're still figuring out what they need from a people and a process standpoint. And they end up obviously maybe due to constrained budgets, but they start smashing together kind of 3 different roles into one in terms of this sort of unicorn data scientist or data engineer that they're trying to hire as well.
Yeah. And so I'm going to take that actually to my own experience when I started my first machine learning project. And what happened there? I remember someone asked me, I want you to build a pricing model. And I said, oh, okay, what do I have to do? I don't know anything. I don't know anything about machine learning. I don't know anything about data science. The one question I did know to ask was, well, do we have the data? That was the first thing.
Yeah.
Do I have the data? And once we realized what kind of data we had and that we did have the data, the next question was, well, who's going to kind of pull this together and get it all done for me? And I think that's when we start thinking about these projects, that's where people land, and then they kind of stay there and they don't take it beyond just, all right, I have a project, I need to build a model, I'm going to bring in a data scientist to analyze a bunch of data for me, and he's going to have all the answers, or she will have all the answers.
Right.
It doesn't work like that. There's so much more behind it. There's like any other project, an entire support system.
Yep. What is the cascade of information? Really, as we shift from exploratory projects to operational projects too, because it's often seen this black box of the data scientist is really the person over. Yeah.
So I think from a firm perspective, there's this misunderstanding as to what it takes to bring up a model, and what it takes to maintain a model, and what resources you need to support that. So, naive that I was, I thought I just need a data scientist. And then I started really looking around my organization at the time and thinking, oh, we have data scientists, just nothing's in production, nothing's in use. We're kind of just looking at results from analysis. How do we take that one step further? And that's where I think when we're talking about keeping data scientists and working through a career, it's looking at, okay, what goes on beyond the model? There's the thought of operational keeping and maintaining models, thinking about how you are going to productionize a model. What infrastructure do you need? Not just software and physical infrastructure, but people.
Certainly. Yeah. And that's really how we see the data scientist role kind of changing over time for almost the worse, in that they become less and less engaged as they go from the exploratory and the interesting, fun research side of the data science to the operational maintenance and the communication and the training that's involved, which is inherently less interesting to the data scientists who might come from a research background. So as that body of work changes, we find attrition starting to happen as they run into those scalability issues, because what they hired in to do is very different to what they're doing now, that they're trying to do more operational data science and really model deployment as well as model maintenance now that it's in operation and production.
Yeah. So I think the issue is, how do you keep really what becomes a CME, right? A subject matter expert on data science, and keeping them engaged without giving them the burden of all the operational coverage that comes along with it, but building the right team for them to work with and engage with to build that operational coverage moving forward.
And I want to ask you too, like your own journey learning the translation aspects, because you talked a lot about really struggling to justify the impact or even sometimes the ROI of some models that you go and deploy, because they often live in research, and when they're going out to the operational side of things, that's just not really a skill set that's taught in university today. So what's been your experience around the translation skills that you needed to adopt as a data science person?
Yeah. So I would say, so you have the model, you're kind of looking at it, you have to somehow build institutional knowledge. There's this thought of building institutional knowledge, understanding what this model is going to be used for. Right. There needs to be more collaboration on that, and understanding of what the end result is. There is this great innovative portion of being a data scientist and creating models and enjoying the research aspect of it. But then it's also realizing, okay, well, how do I build institutional knowledge to gain more projects, to expand, to maybe improve my models by understanding what else is around me available to me.
Yep.
And then on the other side of that is also looking at, all right, we have, at the end of the day, we are not a research firm. We have to all make money, and there's a bottom line. What is the minimum viable product that we need to get out the door to actually produce some kind of asset to the organization?
Yep. And to your point before, who do I need to involve? What are the key dependencies if I'm building a model for the sales and marketing organization? What are the key projects that they have going on, as well as who will I need to pull from that organization to help me really bring it in as something that's highly adopted and attached to existing habits, whether it's a meeting that they have weekly where they'll want to reference this model, or it's a certain decision that they make throughout the day where you want to make it a single point where they can go to efficiently to understand the information and make a decision from it. Because that's the ultimate success in my eyes, is actual business impact and change.
Yeah. And then let's take it one step further and say, I have a model in production and I am excited that these people are using this day to day.
Yeah.
We don't talk about maintaining that model. And what if it starts to deprecate and the situation starts changing, the environment starts changing? So you have to also stay 2 steps ahead in thinking about what's going to come in the future. And I think that's important too, to tie these data scientists to the real day-to-day happenings so that they can almost themselves start thinking about the future and not only using the models to predict, but predict how they can better inform people and better inform themselves that their model is either doing well or not.
Certainly, which brings change management into the fold, which a lot of times data scientists aren't formally trained on the change management aspect and the communication aspect that all is necessary to really make this successful too. And you touch on another point, which is the last step of continuous improvement, monitoring, performance monitoring, and then continuous improvement of that model that's already in production, as opposed to the shiny syndrome where you just move on to the next one. Okay, it's deployed, now let's go on to the next one. And really, that sometimes leaves a bad taste in the mouth of the actual business stakeholders that this is intended for, because it does eventually drift and it does eventually lose value over time from when it was originally deployed.
Yeah.
Yeah. So keeping them engaged is such a huge struggle, but then also helping them grow. And I want to speak to especially the challenge that maybe HR is still learning as an aspect of how to provide opportunities for data scientists to grow and really flourish in an organization too. I want to see if you had any thoughts on that.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of look at it as every individual, regardless of the role, is still an individual.
Yeah.
So there's still this aspect of, as a manager, yes, this is a new team, this is a new member. You might not understand fully what they do or how they do it. But there has to be this aspect of understanding, well, where do you want to go from here? And working through, where do you want to go from here? Because I don't think every single role always has that perfect trajectory to move forward. Some roles do, and some roles it's okay, I'm a junior analyst, I'll be a senior analyst, and I will move forward and I will move up, and it's very it's already directed very easily. But here it's not at all. So at one point you have to understand, is it that people want more projects? Do they want a group of scientists under them that they can become mentors for and guide? And that way they are able and exposed to multiple scenarios. Is it that you want to become more operational and start learning some of the operational aspects of it? There's also opportunities to be more on the business side. You start learning these models and you become very intimate with the business and understanding how it works. Opportunities there. So I think it's really focused on the individual and being very open-minded to see how much you can expose the person to what's around them, and then have that person really come back and say, I'm happy here, I want to continue being a contributor, or I'm not happy, this is what I don't like, and this is what I do like. How do we focus more on what I do like?
Yeah, because it isn't just upwards. It isn't just manager, then director, then in that specific space. It's also, do you want to be a technical principal? And do you want to have a really wide reach in terms of staying on the exploratory and the research side, but working on different projects across the organization to really up the overall organization's capability, kind of one data domain at a time? And to your point also, how many projects do you want to work on concurrently? And also, how connected are you with other data scientists or other data engineers in the organization too? We see that constantly in terms of data scientists feeling like they're living on an island in their specific data domain. And a lot of them want to teach. They want to have some form of knowledge share and mentorship in terms of young analysts or young engineers, just to really bring them up on what's possible, what's interesting, what's next for our industry specifically, just so they have that human connection too, especially in this kind of post-COVID fully virtual environment that we find ourselves into.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to know what you're contributing to. And, back to that island, being on an island, you don't really know what else is going on around you. It's so important to know, what I brought in made a difference.
Yeah.
And this is the difference it made.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I think back to your point around fully operationalizing like a machine learning model in that way, we talked a little about the translation skill sets. Are there other key areas of skill sets that you find as gaps in people in terms of the operational side of machine learning, the scalability side of it all, outside of the research that they might already be formally educated on?
Yeah, so I think that that's another big gap. I think you get the model and then people don't know what to do with it, and they don't know how to support it, and they don't know what people you need around that. So from my experience, we had a model, and I was very quick in that first time, in that first project, building that model, bringing it up. It was working. We had great stats, and then it was a lot of information. And nobody was going to sit there for hours reading through that information. So how do I make a visualization tool? And how do I then adapt that tool into the software that I was running for? In my case, it was a pricing model for a trader. How do I adapt that for a trader where the trader is able to easily get the information he needed at his fingertips very quickly, and then provide me feedback, because of course feedback's always important for a model. So how can I do all that? Well, realistically, my data scientist was not a specialist in, UI tools and visualization. And that was a new person that needed to be brought to the team, that data scientist needed to work with very closely to explain, this is the model, this is how it's working, this is why you see this. This is, and they started collaborating. So that's important, visualization. I had mentioned the deprecation. So I've previously in other talks talked about champion versus challenger. My data scientists realized that their model is deprecating. They have a new model to bring up. We call that the challenger. And so how do you compare these models together? How do you then say, all right, without anybody in the front, the end user realizing, I'm going to take down the old model and bring up the new model, and everything's going to run seamlessly? How do I time that? How do I ensure that that works correctly? When can I do that?
Right. A lot of the engineering and
architecture. Wait months and months, because now you're running on bad data. So you have to do that rather quickly.
Right. So that cutover. So you speak to, I'm trying to imagine this dream team in my head to support a data scientist. So it's like you have definitely a designer or a UX person to really help build the empathy around end user experience related to the model. You also have the engineering side of like, I love that challenger where it's what's the cutover? How can we prepare something to swap in and then have basically the engineering capability to do that seamlessly? So again, the end user doesn't go to the space they usually go and get a blank page or an error because you're in the middle of a cutover at a really critical time for them.
Yeah. And when I start thinking about cutovers, I start thinking about, my data scientist is exploring different libraries and looking at different tools to enhance their model. How do I put that into the rotation, into production seamlessly, effectively, quickly, without worrying again, about the end user. And you need an expert that can really go in and look at these new images and understand these new libraries, be able to take them in, know that, they can seamlessly go into production without this being a heavy lift, because you want that,
Yeah.
that rapid turnaround.
And you speak to kind of the strategic side as well in terms of tooling evaluation and new capability rollout. Wanted to see, your experience related to new capability rollout. You get assigned a certain task and you're working on a project, and maybe it's related to natural language processing or computer vision in that way. But how have you seen companies approach kind of, we want to do this new ML capability in some way? What's the kickoff of that? If you've seen anything related to that?
My experience is we want to start bringing in this new capability. What information do we have? What tools do we need? Kind of almost like any other project, defining the scope, right? Right.
Yeah.
My opinion is you should follow best practices. Define the scope. What are we trying to accomplish? How are we going to accomplish it? What tools do we need to accomplish it? And do that early preparation. And then, of course, data science is more of a science and an art than scripted. So there are times that things do start coming up, but as an organization, you definitely have to be innovative and be open and be free to say, you can work with that. And if that's a tool that you're thinking of using, let us know early on so that we can quickly adapt. And I think that is one of the big issues on especially bigger organizations is quick adoption.
Yeah.
Very difficult to easily adopt. So for you to be able to easily adopt new functionality and new items, I think you really have to have a strong operational flow, some kind of way of bringing it all together and an understanding of what it is that you're doing and how you're doing it and how you're going to do it. And if there's a hiccup, what is that, what kind of hiccup can I come across? How are we going to deal with it?
Yeah, you see a huge business continuity function built out just for like insurance industry overall, but you don't see a lot of business continuity function built out for like models in production or any of the key. And really, I think it's needed if we really want to depend on it as a core function of our organization. What's the continuity of it? And then also you spoke a lot to the coordination, the OpEx of it all inherently. What is the project management function too? So adding another member to that dream team is the project management capability to not only communicate, but then have a roadmap and then have hard dates on when we're going to do cutovers. So it is all concerted in that way and not taking much longer, because we do see capability rollout taking multi-year just because people aren't aligned to the vision. They aren't coordinated around dependencies. Inherently, scientists don't know what they don't know in terms of what else is going on in the organization that impacts it.
Yeah, and there's this aspect of being flexible, but also making sure you hit the deadlines, making sure you hit the targets, making sure that, things keep moving along, and defining what good enough is, right? I think that's another issue, especially with models is what is good enough? Because you can go and tweak and play with things forever. At what point do you say, all right, you can continue tweaking, but this is the version we're going with?
I empathize a ton with these organizations who are doing it for the very first time, because it's hard to know definition of done when you've never done it before. And you can try and get as much industry insights around how other companies have done this and rolled it out before, but definition of done is such a hard thing to visualize and get everyone aligned around too. So I can totally see scopes creep related to that. Yeah, certainly. So just in your career as well, because I know we just have 5 minutes left, I wanted to touch on the education aspect. So you talk about, in your experience, being thrown into these projects and having to stretch your abilities as a data scientist particularly. Wanted to speak to kind of what you saw, what you leveraged yourself, or significant gaps you saw just related to education for data scientists on the job, kind of post-university, once they are practitioners, that you think we could improve on as an industry overall, or some of the best practices that you've seen other organizations use?
Yeah, so getting thrown into fire is always a good way of starting. Yeah, of course, but not ideal at all. I think this thought of once I realized that I bit off more than I can chew on my projects and on my modeling, I actually took a step back and said, I want to work with experts who are going to become mentors. And so I ended up hiring a group of consultants that mentored my team and helped me build that support, helped me hire the project manager, hire the UI team that were going to be my permanent employees, but help me build that skill set internally so that I can work with guiding my team. And then, of course, they became the champions afterwards, and they continued to grow the organization beyond what that consulting team brought on. But I think that that's so important to have someone who's been there, someone who's done that, someone who understands it, someone who can kind of hold your hand a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
okay. I've seen it done this way because, again, being such an immature area overall, there's so many different paths. There's no one right way to do it that you can inherently prescribe. So it is a constant check and adjust, like sailing. You got to constantly tack while keeping the same direction, and having that guidance totally makes sense. Kind of like a personal trainer ahead of a marathon in that way.
Yeah, definitely. Guidance, mentorship, I think is so important. And then there is training. There is this, I think there's this unknown of what does it mean to be operationally running?
Yeah.
I remember having these conversations and going, this is all fine and great, but how do I actually put this in production? And I kept asking people and talking to people and seeking information. And I think, that is the biggest thing, is find other people who've done it and who can kind of walk with you along the way, and give you maybe best practices.
Or scarred stories,
Or scarred stories.
It didn't quite work out, and here's why. And I think getting as close to your industry as possible, because obviously each industry has its own maturity in terms of how far along it is, as well as the use cases that it approaches and the inherent kind of pains that come with that as well too. So,
and regulatory factors too. Yeah. Each industry has a different, regulation that they may have to worry about. Like from my example, finance has all kinds of, regulatory issues that you have to think about as you move through.
I think that's brilliant. And we actually have a question from the audience just related to, as a leader, what do you think is next for AI? And I know it's super widespread as a question, but I think it's super fascinating for you to speak to just as we wrap up today. Like, what's the next hurdle for a company or an industry as a whole in AI that you just foresee with your experience?
I feel like we have many hurdles still that we're overcoming. I think that we are now starting to talk about this operational aspect of it. I have been hearing a lot of talk about, are we making any money off of these models? There's a lot of talk about all of that. So I think those hurdles we still need to overcome. And then something that we've spoken about throughout this webinar is, okay, now as you start establishing an organization within your firm, defining this organization, where does it go from here? How do you upskill people? How do they interact with other operational teams, other sales teams, other, whichever team in the organization? How do they function? Because I think right now they're a subset, quiet, hidden. How do you bring them front and center and start using that knowledge more and more?
Building kind of that center of excellence. And I know teams really try and do that, but building out that knowledge base, again, like AI and models are inherently cross-functional, so does the knowledge and the process and kind of the collaboration as well. So how can we build a core knowledge base, no matter how you do it, to really have the tip of the spear capabilities feed kind of best practices of, hey, consistently, we want everybody in the organization to go and do data access this way or visualization this way as well. But then also continuing to evolve what's next and like keeping everybody in the know around what we're working on, like new capabilities that we're looking to roll out in the years ahead. Certainly. Well, this has all been super fascinating, Jeanette. I do want to do a quick shout out as just anybody who's interested in education related to self-service, data enablement, the translation aspect of product and project management, as well as the operational side of machine learning engineering, machine learning operations, data engineering, and data operations. Reach out. We are Align AI. We help companies scale their capabilities more quickly through training, as well as project support and services overall. So definitely check us out at getalignai.com. And with that, Jeanette, I want to see if there's any other kind of thoughts, ideas, points that you had before we go ahead and wrap up today.
No, I just want to say thank you very much for the opportunity. It was great.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jeanette. To everybody else, we will also make this recording available on our YouTube page. And thank you so much for attending. Jeanette, I hope you have a great rest of your afternoon.
You too. Thank you.
See you guys.